Hi, this is Zach from Born and Wound, and today we'll be taking a look at the Brellum Duobox Chronograph. Brellum is a relatively new Swiss watch brand founded by Sebastian Müller, who is a kind of a veteran in the watch industry. He's been working in it for 25 years, and he's a fourth generation watchmaker in his family. And this is his first kind of setting out on his own. And this is the first line of watches he has created, the Duoboxes, which are a series of chronographs with different colored dials. Actually, not just chronographs, chronometer-rated chronographs. I looked at this website a few times, and something about them really just kind of grabbed me. So I, reached out and asked for one for a review, and I'm really, really glad I did, because the second, I kind of took this one out of the out of its box, which comes in this like large, luxurious wooden box. I was really taken by the quality of this watch. This is not the kind of watch that you expect to be the first, watch of a brand. It has a really kind of high level of fit and finish. I'd say really kind of compares to higher end kind of like luxury or kind of like entry-level luxury Swiss watches. So things in the like, $5,000, $6,000, even maybe even $7,000 range from brands like Baume Mercier and Breitling. Those are the ones that really come to mind. Having that kind of classical Swiss kind of like gentleman sport watch look, a little bit traditional, a little bit classical, but still, has like a nice modern appeal and doesn't feel derivative, even if it is a bit traditional. But most remarkable, actually, beyond the fit and finish we'll get into in the design, is it's really well priced for a Swiss-made chronometer chronograph, coming in at $2,200 on the leather and $2,275 on metal mesh. Those prices are, based on a conversion, so those might change a little bit. But regardless, just a little bit above $2,000. And I really think, this compares easily to a $5,000 watch, and it really kind of looks and feels like one. So there is a lot of value here. So just looking at the watch, it has this kind of like masculine modern sport watch case. So it's 42 millimeters by 51.7 millimeters long by 16 millimeters tall, And a bunch of that height actually comes from the fact that there are boxed sapphire crystals on both the front and back of the watch. So that's something I've actually never seen on the back of a watch. I've seen a domed sapphire on the back, but not a boxed sapphire, which means it actually comes up and over in a kind of a vintage style way. And it's a really beautiful detail, especially on the front. On the back, obviously, it adds height, but when we show you the case back, you'll see how it really shows off the movement beautifully. And even, I think, the movement itself, the rotor might even swing within the crystal, but that could be an illusion. Regardless, it's quite beautiful, and that's where the name actually Duobox comes from. So anyway, 42 millimeter chronograph, I think that's a very kind of normal size for a modern chronograph. It honestly wears smaller than that to me. I really thought it was 40 millimeters for a while, and then I looked and was like, oh yeah, it's actually 42. And that's really just proportions. Everything's kind of nicely spaced. It's very tight. It's kind of compact feeling. The dial is well utilized. So it doesn't feel like there's any kind of open space or any kind of wasted space on it. And then continuing with the case design, it's a very classic shape, very classic silhouette. You have flat sides, you have contouring lugs, but the finishing is really top grade. So you just have beautiful brushing on the tops of these lugs here, brushing along the sides of the case. And then you'll notice this wide polished bevel along the edge of the lugs, which is a beautiful detail. I always love seeing that on watches, especially when you have the contrasting brushing on either side, because it can really stand out. And I like how this kind of flares, so it starts a little bit narrower and comes out, and that creates a nice kind of illusion, actually, of the lug being a little bit thinner while still having that kind of masculine feel. It's a 22 millimeter lug gap there as well. So, just really nice finishing all around, and it just speaks to that quality and that kind of higher end feeling that, once again, great for a new brand, but also great at this price point. On the right side, obviously, you have wide set pushers for the actuating the chronograph in here, and then you have a push-pull crown. You can still manually wind it, and on the flat of that is a really nicely etched design. I can't quite explain what it is. It almost looks like fence posts kind of in a spiraling shape, but it's just very well executed. Quickly looking at the case side of the Duobox, you can see the crystals much more clearly. The top crystal is very tall. It's a few millimeters tall, going straight up and then gently doming over. And that really looks like a vintage acrylic crystal from like a Tudor Submariner from like the 60s, which it just had really tall box acrylic crystals. I really like the style of it. I think that adds some kind of charm to the watch, even if it is overall not like a specifically vintage looking watch and kind of mixing modern details. That it's just a very attractive physical thing to have on the watch. The case back then is much more kind of strange to find, a box crystal on the case back. But when you see the way it looks, the movement looks, you'll see how it kind of emphasizes it. Also, while on the side, just quickly looking at that crown, you can see this really nicely articulated little etching here, which has a matte surface and polished surfaces, just well executed and well finished. Now looking at the case back proper, you can really see that Valjoux 7750 movement. They call it the BR 750-1, but it is a 7750 that has been chronometer rated, comes with the chronometer papers, which is a nice touch. And first, actually looking around the caseback, I really like the caseback execution here. So this is just like a stamped in kind of detail rather than like laser etching. It just has like a much higher end feeling to it than your typical lasering that you'll find on watches that cost any price range. So I like that they did that. I believe it's even numbered, which is very impressive. But yeah, now looking at this movement, so the movement looks like it's really close to the surface, and I think that's because the rotor might actually almost sit a touch within that box crystal, or like if you were to just cap it off without that crystal, it could be too close. So they give it some breathing room like that, and it just gives it this really kind of up in your face feeling, and that really also lets you admire the finishing all around of this movement. Obviously a nicely finished movement like you have here with blued screws, perlage, Côte de Genève, always enjoyable to look at, but chronographs even more so since they're more complex. There's just more going on. So, that's just very enjoyable. The rotor here, very customized and quite attractive. Here you'll find the little Wyvern logo that is also on the dial. So that's the only other place it ties in. And yeah, that's just overall, I think, very appealing. And once again, just for a first watch from a brand, this really speaks to kind of like, a set of skills and just kind of obviously coming from the founder's 25 years of experience. Moving into the dial now, there's 4 different dial colors you can get. There's like a light silver, a blue, black, and then this, what they call meteorite gray. I am a big fan of gray dials, so I was immediately just kind of drawn to this one. And it's a gorgeous gray. It's like a charcoal sun ray, but the sun ray is not too strong on it. So you get a bit of a metallic feel as the light moves around it, more so on the sub-dials than on the main dial. But it doesn't have that sometimes kind of cheap, overly blingy feeling that a sun ray can have. And I think that that's just, speaks to just very, well-tuned, choices and just, obviously overall quality. So there's actually a lot going on this dial. You have basically 3 main indexes. You have an index of applied markers, and that would be for the hours, and that's obviously at like 2, 4. It skips 12, 3, 6, and 9 for obvious reasons here, the sub-dials and the logo. And these are really, really intricate little markers that I quite like. So they have almost like a truck shape, like they kind of slope up and then they're flat on the top. And the slope on the front is polished and has a little loom plot on it with a thin black outline. And then the flat part also polished but has a thin line that's kind of cut into it, a thin groove with a black fill line. So it's a lot going on in a tiny little space. So you simultaneously get the kind of dressier feeling from a polished marker, but then a sportier feeling just from the kind of technical detailing of that. And I think that really, really works well on this watch. Outside of that, you have a minute and chronograph seconds index. Kind of a classic style there, numerals every 5, longer lines per minute second, then smaller lines for 1/5 second. And that is all printed actually in like a slightly metallic silver. I like the choice of a metallic silver here over white, as it's a little bit less in your face, but it still works really well and still has enough contrast, and it also still has a little bit of its own sheen to it, so that plays well with the kind of meteorite gray background there. Finally, on the very edge, you have a pulsation scale. This is cool to see. Obviously, you'll kind of see between tachometers being the most common, and then telemeters being less common, and then pulsations, I'd say, really are the least common. But in some ways, they are almost the most useful. Not that you're actually going to use any, but obviously by using this, you could quickly calculate somebody's pulse. There's a nice little bit of actually optical distortion here from the crystal on the edge. You see this on boxed sapphire crystals. Like if you look at the sapphire crystals on newer Speedmasters, you see a similar kind of thing where there's kind of like this buildup of glass on the side. And what that does is actually compress that graphic a little bit. You can still totally read it, but it has this kind of interesting little like squished effect going on there. Getting in now to the subdials, you have obviously the chronograph subdials, 30-minute totalizer, 12-hour totalizer in active seconds. The design here is quite nice. Rather than having your typical kind of chamfer dip subdial, you have a channel within a raised center area. That center area has concentric circling, and then that channel on all of them have the markings on them, and then the numerals are on that raised platform again. So although they each show something different, there's a very nice balanced feel between them. Like they very much feel like they were designed together. And that just gives the watch kind of a visual congruity. And then I think the overall sizing and spacing of these are quite nice. So everything's still very legible. They take up enough room on the dial, but there isn't a ton of crowding. Perhaps the most controversial detail on the dial is the logo and flavor text here at 3 o'clock. So you have, at the top of this, you have like an applied badge. And if you look closely on it, which might be hard to see on camera, there is a polished silhouette of a wyvern, if I pronounce that correctly, which is a type of dragon. They describe it on their website, and it has to do with the locale that they're from. Beneath that, you have the word Brellum in their typeface, then a line, and then Swiss watchmaking. Beneath that, then in yellow, you have chronometer officially certified. So that's a lot of text going on there. Typically with a 7750, you'd find the day date there. I'm glad they got rid of the day date, as that can be a little bit, I don't know, make it maybe a little bit too sporty, a little bit too casual looking for this watch, and I like where they put the date. But this is a lot of text, and I feel like it might, be a little distracting. I got used to it quickly, but I just think it could be pared down. Do you need that applied logo and that written logo? Do you need to say Swiss watchmaking when it clearly says Swiss made below 6? Stuff like that. So I just think it could be cleaned up. But in the end, I don't think it pulls away too much from the overall look and feel. And I think, and the fact is a lot of Swiss watches kind of go for that kind of heavy branding. Looking now at the hands, the hour and minute hand have this really nice kind of monolith shape to them, and they mimic graphically those applied markers. So you have basically polished wings of steel, a line of black with a thin loomed strip going down them. They look really nice with with those markers, with the dial in general. They're very legible, sized well. I really would not change a thing about them. Then the second hand is a thin stick with a yellow tip. Obviously, you also have chronometer officially certified in yellow, so that it's a nice little tie-in, and I think that little bit of color kind of brings things back to a slightly more sporty feel rather than just dress. The tip of the second hand also actually curves down ever so slightly, which is something I always like to see. Just now talking about the fit and finish of this watch, I think it wears extremely well. Like I said, I thought it was smaller than 42. 42 would be kind of my personal max preference size, so I thought this was smaller. I think it's very comfortable. It's easy to wear. It is tall. There's no way around that, but since a bunch of that height comes from the crystal, visually it doesn't look quite as tall, though it does literally just kind of stand up off the wrist. 51.7 millimeter lug to lug. It's a bit long. I don't think it was too bad on my 7-inch wrist. I think if you're at like a 6.5-inch wrist, you might find it to be getting a little bit on the long side. Certainly wrists larger than mine could wear it. But, overall, I just think this is just a super handsome watch. I like the kind of classical elements to it. Like, it just says Swiss luxury watch to me. But it's just very handsome. There's kind of nothing really like that I find kind of really unappealing about it. It's just good looking. It has a nice amount of dressiness to it, nice amount of sportiness. The metallic gray works really well with different clothing colors. So obviously I'm wearing a gray shirt here, so that's pretty on the nose, but blue, black, whatever would still look really nice with this. Even tried this on with a little bit of a suit or a blazer, and it looks good. As far as straps go, so this is a leather strap. There's a couple different colors. This one is gray faux gator with yellow stitching. Obviously, it's the most sporty option. You could get it in just black. It is not gator, though. It is genuine leather that's been stamped with gator texture. I kind of feel like on a watch this price, and just in general, I mean, if you want to get the gator texture, go for gator. If you want nice leather, go for nice leather. So I don't know. I don't think that that's necessary. Not that it looks bad. Like a real gator strap would look really nice with this. I just think it's a little silly. The deployant clasp here is really nicely made. It's actually finished on the inside with perlage, which, just really good attention to detail there. These can be I find these occasionally a little bit uncomfortable as the metal comes around, but once again, that's the kind of thing you get used to. The metal mesh it comes with is also very nice. It's German made. It's very thick, but it suits the watch well. To kind of wrap up on this watch, I mean, I think what you have here is just a very good value and just a very high quality watch from a new brand. Obviously $2,000 isn't cheap, but what you're getting here really competes with something at a much, higher price point. Not just from Swiss. I think of something like a Bremont, which is where, they have also chronometer grade chronograph movements in their watches, and those are generally in like the $6,000 range. There's other things going on with those watches as well that might add to that price point, but still, chronometer 7750s are not something you come by very often. This one is beautifully decorated, and obviously it's running at chronometer spec, which comes with the papers about that. And then, it's just a very nice watch. There's really kind of nothing, it's hard to kind of complain. Like I said, there's only that extra bit of text on there, but otherwise it's just a very attractive and appealing watch with really great finishing. Please read the full review on Worn and Wound and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.